the place that I want to start here when we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs offense is where I think they're a little bit misunderstood this season. And that is that if you're a real dinosaur and you look at like yards per game or points per game, you think this Chiefs offense stinks and is nowhere near what they've been the prior few years. If you're further along in your journey of advanced statistics, you're looking at your yards per play or a little bit of your success rate, your EPA, and you notice that this team's pretty good. They're not the best, though. They're pretty good. Where this Chiefs team stands out in terms of being different than most statistics can truly quantify is when you look at the drive statistics. The drive statistics show that this Kansas City Chiefs team has driven the football into the red zone at the second highest rate of any team in the NFL this year. And in fact, it is the best rate for any Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes offense since 2018. They've had a lot of success at moving the football into the red zone. Their issues is why they're not viewed as being a better team and scoring more points is because they've been terrible down inside of the red zone. They scored at one of the lower rates in the NFL. It's the lowest rate for any Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes-led offense since those two paired up. They have had trouble scoring the football down inside of the red zone. The reason that that's going to be fascinating, in my opinion, is because they're going up against Vic Fangio in this game. And Vic Fangio is the master at having a lot of experience against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and having a lot of success at forcing them into struggles and not having success. Now, the key thing that we need to remember about Vic Fangio's defense is he'll give up some of the stuff underneath. He's going to try to make you matriculate the ball down the field, be perfect, convert third downs, and get into the red zone. And then, like a boa constrictor, he's just going to constrict you and kill you. He's not going to let you get into the end zone. And he does that against all teams in the league, but particularly he's had success against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. So I've got some crazy stats here to throw at you. So if you look at what Andy Reid so Vic Fangio was in case you guys don't know, was with the Denver Broncos from 2019 to 2021. He played 6 games against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, division rivals. Then he went to the Miami Dolphins in 2023 and was the defense coordinator, played 2 games against the Kansas City Chiefs, one in the regular season. That was a game over in Germany, one in the postseason in the wild card round. So 8-game sample size since 2019 for Fangio versus Reid and Mahomes. In those games, if you look at when Andy Reid played Vic Fangio, they had a 37% red zone touchdown rate. Against all other teams besides Vic Fangio's defenses, they had a 62% red zone conversion rate. Against Andy Reid when Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes played Vic Fangio, they had a 38% goal-to-go touchdown rate. Against all other teams, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes had a 79% goal-to-go rate. Now, those two numbers, like those differences, are massive. They had a lot of success at moving the ball into the red zone. They were getting to the red zone at around a 37% rate, whether they played Fangio or they played somebody else. But they were not scoring touchdowns against Vic Fangio. And this is a big deal to me. This is kind of one of the overarching things when I'm looking at this side of the ball before we dive in deeper here, is because this is something that the Chiefs have actually struggled with this year more than they have in past years. They've been good at getting into the red zone. They just haven't been good at scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Now they're going up against the defense that has foiled even the best Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid teams down inside of the red zone. So I'm going to be fascinated, guys, if they are able to get into the red zone, with just how frequently they're able to score touchdowns against Vic Fangio and this Philadelphia Eagles red zone defense.
I know you had something about that in the worksheet as well, Rich, like this idea that, we are looking at, him from 2 separate teams, from, in some cases, with the Broncos from a long time ago, several years ago, and a different kind of defense, or a different kind of offense for the Chiefs. But ultimately, everything that Warren laid out makes sense when you think about what Vic Fangio wants to do, what he's trying to do, and what he does against all teams, not just the kind of Reid and Mahomes combination.
Yeah, whereas Spags is kind of a guy we know is going to calibrate some things and do some things for opponent. Fangio's probably going to stick with what he does because it lines up with what the Chiefs want to do too. Especially, and I know that the 8-0 record you probably heard like all week against Vic Fangio teams, like, yeah, like when you look at the top down like metrics, like he's done his job as a defensive coordinator. Like he can't control how many points those offenses score that he's been attached to, but like he was the head coach of the Broncos, but you know, these teams that he's had just haven't scored points, but he's done a really good job of at least slowing down Mahomes, of giving Mahomes something to work with. The last 4 times that he's played against a Vic Fangio defense, he's thrown for fewer than 7 yards per pass attempt. He's never thrown more than 2 touchdowns in a game against Vic Fangio. In 8 games, he has 10 passing touchdowns against him. Like that's as good as you can hope for against Patrick Mahomes, right? Like that's as good as you can hope for. Yeah, and when you look at just what the Eagles want to set out and do and what the Chiefs want to set out and do, like the death by paper cuts, right? That's where this game, I believe, is going to be decided. And it comes down to like the Eagles tackling, right? So the Eagles blitz at the second lowest rate in the NFL. Mahomes is blitzed. No one really blitzes him. He's blitzed at the 24th highest rate in the NFL. The Eagles are 20th in rate of man coverage. They aim to prevent shorter passes, make tackles. Well, Patrick Mahomes, he only averages 6.4 air yards per pass this year. That's only higher than Gardner Minshew and Tua Tagovailoa. He's thrown 30.4% of his passes at or behind the line of scrimmage. Only Tua has thrown a higher rate. Against cover 4 and cover 6, which the Eagles run at the highest rate in the NFL, cover 6, and they run cover 4 at the 5th highest rate. They like to play those shells. They don't want to give up big plays, and they're great at preventing vertical shots. And that's not what the Chiefs are really doing on offense anyways, though. That rate for Patrick Mahomes on throws at or behind the line of scrimmage goes to 41%, the highest rate in the league. So the ADOT's going to be shrinking. The Eagles are the number 1 team in the NFL in yards allowed after the catch. They allow the fewest yards after the catch. 58% of Patrick Mahomes' passing yards this season have come after the catch. That's the second highest rate in the NFL. This is where the game is won and lost. If the Eagles tackle like they have all season, this is where the Chiefs struggle, and they look like, because remember, we have a good month sample where the Chiefs have started to look like they're playing their best ball at the end of the year again, right? But you go back to that Houston game, which was literally just one game ago, where they struggled to do 2 things, right? Where Warren said they struggled in the red zone that game, and they struggled to generate yards after the catch. And if they're not able to do those 2 things, we have a large sample this season of this Kansas City Chiefs offense really struggling to score touchdowns because of those 2 factors.
Yeah, and they're going to need to have success on third downs as well. And I dove into that a little bit in the report, and we got a graphic here to show you about not this one. There's a graphic that has Patrick Mahomes on third down. If you could pull that graphic up versus the cover 6 and quarters and how much better Patrick Mahomes is on third downs. There we go. Okay. Patrick Mahomes versus cover 4 or cover 6 on third down performance. He is one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire NFL in terms of first down rate when he's going up against cover 4 or cover 6. But he is one of the best against any other coverage. And just like Rich said, it just so happens that this is exactly the coverage that Vic Fangio runs. Like, this is his dominant coverage. He does not play much man coverage on third down. He does not blitz on third down. He does not even play cover 2. A lot of people are going to tell you about like too high and Fangio and stuff. Just keep in mind, Fangio plays the lowest rate of actual cover 2, but he plays the highest rates of quarters and cover 6. And so this is a style of defense that has given Mahomes a little bit more trouble, clearly, than cover 2 has. And I think that could play a factor here in whether or not Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to convert on these third downs. And so it's sort of paramount for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense to try to bypass third downs as much as possible, because you're going to have these troubles on third downs, I think, against Vic Fangio and the way that he plays pass defense. You're going to need to put yourself in situations where you might be able to run the ball on third and short or just bypass those third downs entirely. But ultimately, you're going to get to that fringe red zone, or you're going to get into that red zone, and then you're going to be dealing with Vic Fangio inside of the red zone. And, Damon mentioned that Fangio doesn't have the same personnel. This Eagles personnel is great. They're playing the scheme great. And I mean, maybe Rich or Ray can speak to this a little bit as well, but that offensive line, the interior offensive line of the Kansas City Chiefs, has been juggled around a little bit due to injury. It is very weak right now. And you're going up against the strength of that Philadelphia Eagles defense with Jalen Carter in there, causing havoc for both the run game, interior run game, which the Chiefs have been running up the middle a lot because they don't have that speed around the edges right now, as well as in the pass rush aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think that, like, if we're going to go down and the rabbit hole to more like an individual player, props, which again we'll be talking a lot about props here in the second hour, but even into DFS, if you're playing showdown and stuff, a lot of this kind of like what the Eagles want to do, what we expect them to do, and again because it's different than Kansas City, we're not even expecting them to change. It's just what they do, and it appears to be a very good, I let's say antidote. That seems a little strong, but in a very good way to play against Mahomes in this offense and the way that they're running their offense this year. We also have to look at the players, and I think Xavier Worthy is someone obviously coming off of a great game, coming off of, let's say, his career best game.
Yeah.
This in
Career high.
that AFC Championship game, and he's coming off of that. You might get really excited about him from props and DFS, but then you look at what the Eagles do, and it doesn't really set up that well for him particularly to have a big game.
Yeah, and not even just if you look at the top-down stuff where the Eagles are second in the catch rate allowed to wide receivers. They allow the fewest yards per target to wide receivers. They're seventh in touchdown rate allowed to wide receivers. That alone makes it a hard matchup. Like, Eagles have been a hard matchup against wide receivers all year, especially since they added Cooper DeJean into the starting slot role to go with Quinyon Mitchell. They've gotten great play out of those rookies with Darius Slay. But when you look at Xavier Worthy, it ties into something we talked about. 62% of his receiving yards have come after the catch this season. The only wide receiver with as many receiving yards as Xavier Worthy to rely on yards after the catch at a higher rate is Khalil Shakir, 70% of his yards, actually a nice 69.9%. The Eagles don't allow yak. They're number one in yak allowed in the NFL, the fewest yards after the catch. But here's where it gets even crazier, is that the splits for Xavier Worthy, even though he's kind of moved into a focal point of this offense, he has a 25.8% target rate on his routes against man coverage compared to just 16.8% against zone coverage. We just laid out all the man zone coverage stuff. He averages 1.18 yards per out run against zone coverage, 1.85 yards per out run against man coverage. In that AFC title game where Sean McDermott played a little bit more aggressive man coverage, 5 of his catches for 75 yards. Remember, he had 85 yards in the game, came against man coverage, 30 yards of yak after against man coverage. And then when we go peel back the onion even further and we talk about those cover 4, cover 6 coverages, Xavier Worthy's only been targeted on 12.7% of his routes against those coverages, 1.03 yards per route run. The Eagles are going to have to change some tendencies for Xavier Worthy to roll over that game that he had last week. And I know a lot of people are excited about Xavier Worthy stuff and the trajectory he's been on, but where he's won this year doesn't align with where you beat the Eagles and not where he's had success in this offense. So does that open the door for a guy like Hollywood Brown to have more involvement? Ancillary guys, do they dust off DeAndre Hopkins? Does Juju Smith-Schuster contribute like he did in the AFC title game? Does Noah Gray get involved? If you're going to peel back Xavier Worthy's target share, they have to go somewhere else. And that leaves the door open for one of these, ancillary Chiefs guys. And we've seen the Chiefs guys do this in these Super Bowls, right? Like someone, Sky Moore catches a touchdown, or Kadarius Toney. Like, who's it going to be in this game?
That's the hard part, because all those props are so low for each of these guys, and you could try to pick and throw your dart and figure out which guy it might be. But what ultimately might happen is you get it wrong, whereas you could bet all of these guys under, and you'll probably get most of them right, except for one wrong. So it's a tricky situation with the props and the way that the Kansas City Chiefs are operating the offense. And then you layer in, just real quick, like, I personally think they might want to use a little bit more 12 personnel with an extra tight end out on the football field because of how that matches up with the Philadelphia Eagles defense. But that's going to put Andy Reid in a bind a little bit because he finally has all these wide receivers healthy. So doesn't he want to try to use those guys who are a little bit more talented than Noah Gray out on the field? It just becomes very confusing to try to anticipate what Andy Reid might deploy
now
here.
On Noah Gray. Let's this is a safe space for Noah Gray here. So let's watch that. We do have a lot of comments about Hunt, though. We've been talking about this passing game and the struggles they've had. Kareem Hunt, as I think people that read Rich, read Warren, have listened to us know that Kareem Hunt has taken over as the lead back here for Kansas City. We haven't really talked about their running game. We led with that with the Eagles, obviously, with Saquon. We haven't talked about their running game, and it's because I think we're pretty much all in agreement here that this is a really tough spot for a running game that just It hasn't been successful all year. We did have a spurt from Kareem Hunt, obviously in that Bills game, but you look after the first quarter and it was back to kind of what we've seen from them. And yeah, I don't think any of us really, Warren, have a ton of expectations for this Chiefs running game.
Yeah, the problem is when you layer in the element of context with the schedule that they've gone up against down the stretch here, when the run game hasn't been brilliant. If we want to throw up the first of two graphics as it relates to the strength of schedule, this is looking at explosive run defenses. How many explosive runs in terms of run rate do these defenses allow? Most of these defenses that they've gone up against have been terrible at allowing explosive runs. And this team still is not having a lot of success. Compare this to league wide of all 32 teams. When you look down the stretch at the next graphic here, and you'll see that the Kansas City Chiefs have played the number one easiest by far schedule of explosive run defenses from week 11 onward. And yet they're still not a great run offense. And now you pair that with the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles are a strong run defense. In addition, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to take advantage of personnel along the offensive line of the Kansas City Chiefs because they are weaker from a personnel perspective run blocking than they were several weeks ago. I mean, these injuries didn't happen week 4 or 5. These happened really recently. And so I just think it's going to be tough to, once again, figure out which guy is going to have success here. Because I think there's the thought for some sports bettors that Pacheco, he's a hard surface. It's a fast track down there in New Orleans, that maybe it's time for a little bit of Pacheco with an extra week off. And so maybe he could get some run. But Reid has definitely been riding that hot hand. If those first couple of runs from Pacheco don't turn out so well, then he's just going to go back to the old trusted Kareem Hunt. But I don't know that Hunt is very explosive against this type of run defense. So Rich, like, what do you have any sort of ceiling or expectations here? Because if we don't get much success out of the run game, you think Andy Reid's going to stick with this? He's just going to go back
Absolutely
to his
not.
old faithful Patrick Mahomes.
No, I mean, we've seen every time that in these Super Bowls, like, they put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands. Like, that's what I believe is going to happen here, because this Chiefs run game and having a little bit of success against the Bills is something we expected them to have last week, right? That's who the Bills have been this year against the run. And the Bills calibrated after that first quarter. Kareem Hunt rushed 4 times for 34 yards and his touchdown in the first quarter of that game in the AFC Championship game, then ran 13 times for 30 yards the rest of the game. Chiefs running backs in the second half of that Buffalo game ran 10 times for 24 yards. And that's who they've been this season. Even against that schedule that you showed, the Chiefs running backs are 30th in yards per carry. And they're going up against a run defense that is excellent. They got horses up front. This is what they do. Like, the Eagles are 6th in yards per carry allowed to running backs. They're 6th in success rate against running backs. They're 7th in yards allowed before contact per rush. And the Kansas City Chiefs running backs are 23rd in yards generated before contact per rush. They're also dead last in the NFL in explosive run rate. This is the weakest component of this offense by far. And it's going to be really interesting if they just don't have any success running the football, how quickly they abandon it and just let Patrick Mahomes try to throw. I mean, this could be a game where if you get the play volume, which is the question of how successful they are against Saquon Barkley in the lead in, but this is definitely a game where I believe the Chiefs could end up with, like, depending on flow of game, like easily like a 75% plus pass rate, like something in that neighborhood.
And the other thing too, just to add real quick, Ray, is think about the end of game state. If the Chiefs do have a lead late, unlike against some opponents where they could just run the clock out, they might not be able to run the clock out here. They might have to throw the clock out because they are not going to have a lot of success, and they'll just be punting it right back if they stick with a first down run, second down run, etc.
I also think I haven't seen this yet, but if we could find like a Mahomes to lead the Chiefs in rushing, that might be, I'd be interested to see what that might be lined at if we could find that somewhere. If you find that somewhere, let me know. I would be very interested in betting that. Mahomes has like a 15% scramble rate in the playoffs. If they're going to find success on the ground, I think it probably is him at kind of where we are right now. Speaking of props, we're going to transition into that. There's a ton more about this game. There are a ton more angles in this game. You can read about them with Warren's Super Bowl 59 report. Again, it's 67 pages. It's available to all of our Super Bowl subscribers. Make sure you go and check that out. You can read Rich's worksheet available at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Again, just a massive, massive book of information about the Super Bowl. I recommend you go and check it out.